Hi, I'm Greg Hunter, and this is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, January 17th, 2014. Well, first up, President Obama, he met with Democratic senators at the White House this past week and basically said that with or without Congress, he's going to continue with his agenda. And what that is he's going to ramp up his executive orders. He's just going to bypass Congress. It's hard to believe, but President Obama is a constitutional scholar. I mean, you think he may have learned that, there are three bodies of government: judicial, that's where the Supreme Court is; legislative, that's the House and the Senate; and executive, that's where the president is, the executive branch. And they're supposed to be equal branches of government to provide checks and balances. So one branch of government doesn't get too much power, but he evidently doesn't understand that concept. As a constitutional attorney, he's going to ramp up his executive orders for things like immigration and income inequality, raising the minimum wage, which I don't think the government should set the price of anything, including labor. But that's what he thinks he's going to be doing, what he is signaling he'll be doing. And my prediction is that if he does ramp up these executive orders, they're going to backfire. It's going to backfire right in his face. I hope he doesn't do it. It's bad for the country to try to get around the Constitution and the House and the Senate. He should be working with these guys and negotiating, and so should they. They should be working with him. Speaking of backfiring, President Obama paid a visit to North Carolina. He's going to talk about, jobs and manufacturing. Came to North Carolina. He's also going to be talking about this in the State of the Union address. But here's the way the local papers, basically couch this thing in a headline, and it's way down here, and it's Obama's North Carolina visit carries a subtext. No, there's no subtext to this. This is the text in it, as far as I'm concerned, because what happened was Kay Hagan, the U.S. Senator from North Carolina, decided she was too busy to show up. The White House backs her up on this, that Kay Hagan in the Senate was just too busy with her legislative agenda. Now let's just walk through this for a second here. Let's see. The President of the United States, who's a Democrat, the leader of your party, decides to come to your state during an election year. Kay Hagan is up for election in the U.S. Senate in November of 2014. So President Obama comes to your state in an election year to talk about jobs and unemployment and manufacturing. And you're too busy? You can't make it. Too busy. Really? Well, here's my take on this whole thing. This is what I think. And I think, as I've been telling you, Democrats would be running from Obama and Obamacare as this Obamacare continues to spiral out of control, unfold, and be the increasing disaster that it is. The Obamacare legislation where you can't keep your doctor, you can't keep your insurance plan, where it's not less expensive for more people, that it is an increase in premiums and deductibles and co-pays, and that, if you don't do it, that you are taxed, you are fined for not doing it, and it is being administered by the IRS in part. That legislation that people hate and that young people are shunning, that legislation. And Kay Hagan didn't want to be on the same stage. He talked at NC State and was in the state. That Kay Hagan, a senator up for re-election in a state whose unemployment rate is higher than the national average, and your president of your party is coming to talk about jobs and manufacturing, and you can't be here? Really? That's right. Kay Hagan was way out in front, about 17 points or so here in North Carolina, until the realization of Obamacare hit. And now, spoom, she is in trouble. My prediction, Kay Hagan will lose her Senate seat. The Republicans will control the House of Representatives. That's a foregone conclusion. They'll increase seats, likely. And the Republicans will take control of the U.S. Senate. Now, listen, I'm not a fan of the Republicans. They've got plenty of sin. But at least they didn't vote for Obamacare. That's run by the IRS. That's lovely, isn't it? The Republicans are going to take control of the Senate, and somebody who's got a target on her back legislatively and at the polls and for the election, not really a physical, real target. But Kay Hagan, she's gone. Out of here. That's what I think. That's my prediction. And the Democrats in the U.S. Senate will lose control. This is going to be the main issue. There's no subtext. You double and triple somebody's health care. You take away their doctors. You take away their plans. You raise their co-pays and raise their deductibles. You do that to them. You think you're going to stay in power? You want to come up with some smokescreen issue like income inequality or immigration? No, that ain't going to work. That's going to be the issue unless we have war in the Middle East. That's another day and another time. But unless we have some blowout war in the Middle East, that's what's going to happen, in my humble opinion. More bad news for the Democrats, and it really comes to the Democrats in part by some of the Democrats. And that is this new Senate report that came out. The Senate's in control by the Democrats. People like Dianne Feinstein and Harry Reid. And here's the headline. Yes, Benghazi attack was preventable. The report blamed the State Department that was run by Hillary Clinton. This is going to be a giant black eye for Hillary Clinton. They say it was the whole thing was the fault of the State Department because they refused requests for security. 4 Americans were murdered there. I'll tell you who else has a black eye. That'd be the New York Times. It did a 6-month investigation only to come up with this crazy story about how, we did a 6-month investigation and we're, the paper of record, for goodness sakes. And of course, we think that it wasn't Al-Qaeda related. That's false. That is false. Wrong. And we think it really was that anti-Islamic video that caused this spontaneous attack. It really wasn't an Al-Qaeda related attack. And false. Wrong. We now know that's wrong too. And it gets better or worse depending on your perspective. So now we find out that on the day of the attack, 9/11/12, the day of the attack, the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Leon Panetta, the then Secretary of Defense, hear about this. They go to the White House to brief the president. Yes, they briefed the President of the United States on the day of the Benghazi attack. Everything about Benghazi after that, out of the Clinton State Department, was a lie. I don't know how to sugarcoat this. It was a lie. Hillary Clinton is going to be running for president in 2016. That's what they say. And she so famously said, what difference does it make? Let me finish her sentence satirically. What difference does it make if we lied? This is going to be one of the many issues that's going to be really hard, even for Hillary Clinton, to get past in 2016. You think it might question her leadership ability? Yeah, I think so. Next up, I got to tell you about the ongoing recovery. More headlines for the recovery that we're being, it's crammed down our throat. Here you go. Here's the latest recovery headline. JCPenney to cut 2,000 jobs. JCPenney to cut 2,000 jobs and to close 33 stores. Now, that goes along with Sears closing 5 stores and laying off 2,500. And, hey, did you hear about Best Buy this holiday season? Their stock took a $10 hit, and their earnings took a huge hit. Why? Well, Christmas wasn't so good. And that's basically what we're finding out now. Retailers across the board, yeah, not so good. Oh, sure, there were some increases in online sales, but no, retail wasn't so good. And, if you factor in real inflation, are they really increasing? I mean, did sales increase at all? That's what you're hearing about how, not a bad crit. No, not good. This is not growth. Laying off people and closing stores and taking huge hits to your stock when you're a retailer, that isn't a growth story. That's not a success story. That's not a recovery story. Well, what is happening is cars and houses, went up. But, of course, that's Fed money printing. And Fabian Calvo so famously said this week is that, anybody that can fog a mirror can get a home loan or a car loan. I mean, that's what they're doing to the money. They're trying to, this is their idea. They're going to try to ramp up everything by handing out free money to people. How long can that last? I think until the rest of the world says, we're done with your dollar. We're done with your bonds. I don't know how long it can last, but it is not sustainable. people should have taken a hit. People should have, real estate should have gone down to 10% of its value. And we'd have hit a bottom, and we'd have been coming up here by then. We wouldn't have indebted the country so much. People would love the dollars. And wow, those people took a hit. I'll be happy to trade in the dollar. I mean, that's what we should have protected, the dollar and the credit rating of the U.S. Instead, we protected 5 or 6 big banks. That was it. And Wall Street. That's what we protected at the peril of the country. We have this budget deal that we finally had with the House and Senate passing the budget. I'm sure the president will sign it. It's $1.1 billion. Was it crazy spending? Well, it wasn't crazy increases, but still, I mean, we got a $1 trillion, $1.1 trillion, I should say. We have $1 trillion cash deficit every year, and that doesn't count what we're really going on the hook for, according to people like John Williams. In 2013, he estimates it was $6.8 trillion. That's the real indebtedness, what we really took on in deficit and debt and commitments. $6.8 trillion, 1 year. I mean, the entire gross domestic product of the nation is, what, 15 trillion around? And, the newspaper brought up, winners and losers and things like that. And, listen, I'm going to give you a summation of the budget deal. More of the same. Wall Street got less regulation. They call that a winner, but really we're the loser for that. You saw how well no regulation worked with the whole subprime and ratings fraud and foreclosure fraud and money laundering and, all that. And, but there's one bright spot. The IRS lost about a little more than $500 million in funding. And, those are the folks that are administering in part Obamacare. So for that, I say, that's not such a bad idea. That's not so bad, really. Next up, the president is going to be talking about NSA spying. He had a group of people. He got a committee together, a group of people to take a look at the NSA spying to give, some recommendations, industry people. And, they weren't keen on it. They also said that, according to them, this group that the president got together, let me make sure I get that right, is, review panel. They said, the NSA didn't, they didn't stop any terror attacks with their spy tactics. Even the outgoing NSA director, General Keith Alexander, the NSA director, going out when asking Congress in October of last year or so, he said, how many terror attacks did, really, you're under oath, how many terror attacks did the NSA spying stop? At 1, perhaps 2? That was his answer. Here's the way they're showing it in the newspaper. I mean, ding, ding, ding. Maybe the mainstream media is like, hey, whoa, they're spying on us, and maybe they'll attack the First Amendment and our ability to make money. NSA reform's unlikely to be quick or easy. I agree with them. I mean, this is going to be hard to put the spy genie back into the bottle, but at least some people are waking up. And I do have to say one thing about USA Today. You see me on here, and I dog them pretty hard sometimes, the USA Today newspaper. But this is a op-ed piece that they allowed to be printed in the USA Today, and I got to give them a little tip of the hat here. We need real protection from the NSA. You should read this in the USA Today this past week. And, we do need real protection from the NSA. If they're not stopping terrorism, then why are they collecting data and phone records and computer records on every American and basically spying on everybody in the entire free world? I mean, what are they doing? This is not about terrorism. It's about control. What are they afraid? Why are they afraid of losing control? What's going on with that? Hopefully people are waking up, and the people that really need to wake up are the people in the mainstream media, really. The First Amendment, the Constitution, should be protected. Finally, anyone who doesn't think the gold and silver markets are manipulated, well, stop living in denial. Stop being delusional. Every market is manipulated. And, Germany's one of their top financial regulators, Elke Koenig, said of the manipulation of the precious metals markets that it's worse than the Libor rate-rigging scandal. It's worse than the Libor rate-rigging scandal. Libor basically sets the interest rates on, $800 trillion in transactions globally. I also set the rates for all these interest rate swaps, and according to Ms. Koenig, one of the Germany's top financial regulators, she says it is worse than the Libor rigging scandal. I mean, Stocks are rigged, interest rates are rigged, mortgage market is rigged, the gold market is rigged, the bond market is rigged. We live in an era, in a time, where the criminal banks are rigging all the markets, and they are allowed to do so by the big governments of the world, at least the Western world. I mean, I'm sure that's a stable platform that we can all, count on to be, stable and be good for us in the future. That's the problem. All this rigging, crime, fraud hurts confidence. It's also complicated with the, hundreds of trillions of dollars in interest rate derivatives, and the phony accounting, and all the rigging of all the markets is absolutely, is complex. And things that are complex, according to, Professor Nassim Taleb, that, complex systems are inherently fragile. We're going to be talking about this criminal fraud and all the goings on. I mean, every week there's some sort of fine. Last week it was J.P. Morgan and Bernie Madoff with a $2.5 billion fine. Part of that was to get around criminal charges. We're going to be talking to former regulator and Professor William Black at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. He is an expert about regulation, about crime, about fraud, about finance. We'll be talking to William Black next week on USA Watchdog. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your comments. Thanks for your donations. Have a nice weekend. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter.